Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this evening as we learn about the distinguished career of Vice Admiral Samuel Lee Gravely, Jr. Tonight, we're joined by retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Blair Sawyer and current president of the Virginia Union University, Vice Admiral Samuel Lee Gravely, Jr. Capital Beltway Alumni Chapter. Please remain muted during the presentation, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. Also, feel free to post any questions in the chat and we can read them for you later. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, please check out our website, poolsvilleseniors.org, and consider joining other events in the future. So without further delay, you can begin.
Okay, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for the kind introduction. And I'm honored today to be able to talk to the Poolsville seniors. It's a wonderful group. I've come to know learn a lot about the group from Richard and Dorothy Norwood, who are close friends of mine. But it's wonderful to be here with you to talk about the life and legacy of Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely, Jr. And whose legacy has not only to come to influence the Navy, but also a lot of African Americans of all services. And as Kelly said, I'm Army, so I'll just say this is, my comments do not represent the Army, and these are my opinions. But I'm retired, so you can't hold it against me. But so it's definitely a lot of Navy learning here, but I'm happy to do that. I spent about 13 years in joint assignments, and I worked for admirals and Air Force generals and Marine generals, and so it's wonderful to be here and with you all today. And I would like to just take a moment to recognize any veterans that are in the audience. Like someone mentioned, tomorrow is Veterans Day. I am a veteran. I've served over 26 years in the military, and I've all over the place. Pretty unique career. Maybe I'll share some if we have time. And I'm married, and I have my wife on the call, Sandra, and we have 2 daughters, and she's been with me every step of the way. So I'd like to thank all the veterans for service to our nation. I'm gonna go ahead and share screen here. So give me 1 second. Okay, want to see that? Can y'all see the screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. And one thing that I wanted to mention, I am the president of the Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely Capital Beltway Alumni Chapter of Virginia Union University National Alumni Association. And, my first awareness of Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely was in 2004, after being assigned back into the area with the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard at Fort Myer, Virginia. Being back in Virginia gave me the desire to reconnect with my beloved alma mater, Virginia Union University. I was one of the last cadets to come out of Virginia Union, and I wanted to take the opportunity to try to get back and try to help the ROTC program there. It had ended, and so I wanted to volunteer and get back. So I reached out to the university, and they put me in contact with the president of a local alumni chapter. And the president at that time was Withers. He was happy to meet me and my wife because we both were alum, and the alumni chapter meetings were getting older. This is his words. Don't kill me, Richard. But the alumni chapter meetings were getting older, and they wanted young people, and that was true. He wanted to groom folks to become the next president and get some things done. But unfortunately, before we got to that point, I got orders for Korea. And so I was deployed to Korea for a year. And so my wife had to volunteer to be chapter president. And when she volunteered to be chapter president, David, who's the son of Vice Admiral Gravely, became the vice president. And so this is how we got to learn about the family. Vice Admiral Gravely, his family. Vice Admiral Gravely was a member of the alumni chapter before he passed away, and he served major roles in helping the alumni chapter to provide scholarships for students at Virginia Union. And because of his role and influence, we also changed our name of our alumni chapter to the Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely Jr. Capital Beltway chapter. And so we changed that. So that's how our chapter became named after him. And let's see here. And so before we get started in that, I just wanted to open up with a quick video just honoring him. This is a video done by the Navy League, and it's talks about him being a trailblazer.
A trailblazing native who broke a number of color barriers in the United States Navy was honored at the Virginia War Memorial today. Our Cameron Thompson was there and has more on the life and legacy of Admiral Samuel Gravely.
I feel completely honored.
Tracy Gravely reflects on her father's legacy on land and sea.
It's humbling.
Her father, the late U.S. Navy Admiral Samuel Gravely Jr.
It makes me very proud to have a father that's had so many accomplishments.
As Wednesday, dozens stood beneath his quote at the Virginia War Memorial, 50 years to the day he was promoted to Admiral, becoming the first African-American to achieve that rank.
Trailblazer.
Just one of many color barriers that the Richmond native broke during his 38-year career, starting as an enlisted seaman in 1942 during the Second World War.
Overcoming prejudice, Jim Crow laws, and segregated Navy by sheer talent and determination.
From an enlisted sailor to a distinguished officer, to a commanding officer, to admiral, to fleet commander.
Gravely passed away in 2004, and in 2010, the Navy commissioned a destroyer in his honor. Its current and first African-American commander, Corey Odom, noted their career parallels.
I feel I am a real-time example of what milestones and barriers Admiral Gravely was able to break down.
And on this day, Gravely was given another honor with a proclamation from Virginia's governor.
I, Ralph S. Northam, do hereby recognize June 2nd, 2021 as Admiral Samuel L. Gravely Jr. Day.
He was a great military person. He had lots of firsts, but he was also a great father, a great uncle, a great neighbor.
And while noting the Admiral's success in the Navy, they praised Samuel, the family man, who tried to keep things as normal as possible and imparted life lessons they carry with them to this day.
One thing that stuck out with me, he understood that education is lifelong.
And Gravely says what others can learn from her father is to not be afraid to go after what you want.
Be who you want to be, take pride in what you do, and be great at it.
And friends and family hope that this isn't the last commemoration for Admiral Gravely. They say they are working to erect a statue in his honor somewhere here in the city of Richmond and hope to have that unveiled by this time next year.
All right, y'all still there?
Still here.
Okay. So again, we named the Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely Capital Beltway Alumni Chapter. These are our purpose and goals. And we, part of what we're doing is keeping his life and legacy alive. We support the principles and ideas of Virginia University. And we're also proud, our main goal for this year is to establish a $25,000 scholarship endowment and observance of Admiral Gravely's 100th birthday at VU, which is his alma mater. And so I just wanted to share just some highlights real quick. We did in March, we did a tree planting ceremony. This is the elementary school that's named after Vice Admiral Gravely. I think the school was built in 2008, and it's located in Haymarket, Virginia. And we had a wonderful time, and that's Miss Gravely sitting there in front with the children. They interviewed her. We planted a tree, and so we try to maintain a connection with the elementary school in Haymarket, and also with the crew of the destroyer. And then in June, we did a scholarship golf tournament fundraiser. It was at Andrews Air Force Base, and this was a significant fundraising event to help us come close to our goal of reaching that endowment. And so again, we're keeping his life and legacy alive. And this was the scholarship recipient. She's a junior at Virginia Union University, and she will get, we will fund her throughout till she graduates. And that's Miss Admiral Gravely's daughter-in-law, Beverly, there in the green. And you guys know Dorothy. And so that was a wonderful event. And then just last month, to commemorate his 100th birthday, Miss Gravely turned 100 in December. So we did celebrate that at the elementary school. So here in October, at the end of October, close to his death, we went and laid a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery. And he's buried in section 66-107. And this is significant to me because I got stationed here in 2003, but we were living in Alexandria at the time. But we later moved, the next year we moved down to Gainesville, which was right around the corner from Admiral Gravely and Miss Gravely's home. And so, I was that close to meeting him in person before he passed away in 2000. And so we had a wonderful time there, keeping his legacy alive. And a lot of the alumni members know him. The lady in the blue with the hat, with the Navy hat on, she served with Admiral Gravely on the scholarship committee. And so she shares many memories about him and the hard work that he did. And so just want to thank that. And I got one more video here.
Samuel Lee Gravely, Jr. was the first African-American officer to command a U.S. Navy warship and a U.S. Navy fleet, as well as the first African-American vice admiral. Gravely was born in 1922 in Richmond, Virginia. He attended Virginia Union University for 3 years, but left to join the Navy Reserve in 1942. He went on to attend the Navy College Training Program at the University of California, Los Angeles, and the Midshipman School at Columbia University, becoming one of the first African-American officers in the Navy. He was assigned as the only black officer to the USS PC-1264, one of only 2 World War II naval ships with a predominantly black crew. The Navy used both of these ships to evaluate the ability of African-American service members to perform regular naval duties. After World War II, Gravely was released from active duty service, though he remained in the Navy Reserve. After President Truman ordered the integration of the military in 1948, Gravely was recalled to active duty and assigned as a Navy recruiter in Washington, D.C. in an effort to recruit more African Americans to the military. Gravely remained in the Navy for the next 38 years, going on to command the USS Theodore E. Chandler in the U.S. Navy's 3rd Fleet. Gravely played key roles in integrating the Navy, first as a recruitment officer and later as an effective and respected naval commander. He is buried here in Section 66.
Okay. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. In the summer of 2004, this is a really good, this is The 2004 Navy pioneer, Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely Jr. was the first African-American to be commissioned an officer in the United States Navy. He was the first to command a Navy ship, the first to command a fleet, and the first to become an admiral. And this memoir here is co-written by noted naval historian Paul Stilwell, and he describes the life and boyhood in Richmond, his life and boyhood in Richmond through his enlisted service on a World War II submarine chaser to the later tours of duty at sea ashore. And denied housing and even being jailed for impersonating an officer, he recounts the efforts to overcome both culture and institutional obstacles of racism. In 2009, the Navy named a guided missile destroyer in honor of Gravely. And so this is a really good book. It's got a good afterword by Ms. Alma Gravely. Highly recommend it to you for reading. And it's where I get a lot of my references from. And so I just wanted to just. Okay, we talked about where he was born. Admiral Gravely was born in June 22 in Richmond, Virginia. He attended Virginia Union University, which is in Richmond, Virginia, for 3 years. Postponed his education in 1942 to enlist in the Navy Reserve as a seaman apprentice. 2 years later, Admiral Gravely commissioned as an ensign after graduating from the U.S. Naval Reserve Midshipman School at Columbia University in New York City. He was the first African-American U.S. Navy officer. And, you know, in the book, he talks about, you know, he was the oldest of 5 children. He lost a brother and he lost his mother at age 15. And he actually attended Virginia University at about 15 years old because his dad wanted him to go to school. And he talks about his experience being a young man on campus. You know, his dad wanted him home by 10, so he really couldn't get, you know, the real college experience. And then he felt like everyone was, you know, older than him, which they probably were. And, you know, and the challenges of trying to fit in at Virginia Union. He went to basic training at the Naval Station Great Lakes, Illinois, which we just happened to go near there, to Lake Michigan, Chicago. This summer is really nice, and that's where you know, if you ever go through Chicago Airport, you'll always see a lot of midshipmen or ensigns or Navy folks because that's where they do a lot of their training at. But he trained at Camp Smalls, and Camp Smalls was named after a civilian who during the Civil War captured a ship. And so, you know, he talks about his experience of being enlisted, learning the Navy. This was his first experience. He later on went through the V-12 program, which is a program for Navy officers. At the time, the Navy was trying to educate its officers, sailors to become officers. And so they, you know, it came down from Department of Defense, they called the War Department, to stand up the V-12 program, which he went through. And he was supposed to go to UCLA for this program, but UCLA didn't accept him, and he ended up going to University of Los Angeles. He ended up staying in the basement, and he, you know, he talks about his experiences through that, but he didn't let it stop. And he finished midshipman school and later commissioned. And he was also he kind of started training 8 months before the Golden 13. The Golden 13 was one of the first 13 group of Black officers. Well, 12, and one was a warrant officer. And so, you know, they were the first African-American officer in the U.S. Navy. So his early life is very interesting, and how he describes it. And one thing that's interesting about Admiral Gravely is is he didn't let the obstacles of being segregated back then stop him. You know, he you know, he did what he had to do, and obviously he became. As they talked about in the videos, World War II and the Korean War broke out. This was one of 2 ships that had enlisted Navy sailors, the PC-1264. He served aboard it, which is a class submarine chaser built in the U.S. Navy during World War II. She was one of the only 2 U.S. Navy ships to have predominantly African American enlisted complement during the war. After this stint with the PC-1242, Vice Admiral Gravely returned to Virginia Union and completed his degree in history, which that's also my degree. And this just is a little bit more information. If you're not familiar with the Navy, it's very interesting how they build these ships with a lot of steel, and how they go to port, and the different systems and technologies they have with them. And so when he this was his first sea duty. And so, I have this quote in there. He says, when guys were wrong, I take note of it. That led them to say, hell, this guy's just another member of the establishment. Of course, they were right, because he had to do his job. And so I think that is very unique, because it reminds me of one time when I was an officer taking over my first unit. And I had someone share with me that, even though, this was years ago, and even to 1996, when I was coming in, taking over my first platoon, I was told at one time, Blair, you're a black officer, so when the soldiers see you coming, they cringe, because they know they're going to have to. You're going to hold them to a higher standard, because you have to work twice as hard. And that was my, just one of my experiences being an officer in the military. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it. Like, I never thought they saw me like that. And that was very interesting. And it helped me to accept. He was arrested for impersonating an officer and submarine chaser. This is a very interesting story, because it happened in Miami, Florida. His dad was very nervous for him to go down there, and I got to hurry up, because I know we're running out of time. But his dad didn't want him to go down in the South back then, and he was arrested in Miami, because what happened, they pulled into port to get some maintenance done, and he was used to being around enlisted sailors, right? Because he was told to sleep there. He could sleep with the officers. He couldn't go to the officer quarters. He couldn't do what the other officers were doing. So he had to hang out with the enlisted. Well, if you've been around the military long enough, you probably heard officers military is very rank structure. So officers are with officers, and enlisted with enlisted. Well, he didn't think about that at the time, and he talks about it in the book. And so they pulled into port, and they went to, he had been down there before. So he told the guys, hey, meet me over here and I'll show you around town and stuff. And this is where he was seen in an officer uniform, and he was arrested, and he almost got in big trouble for that, because the commander of the ship said, hey, what are you doing hanging around this enlisted, right? And so his boss at that time, talked to, got him out of it, and he didn't get in trouble. So his first job was as an engineer, which, most Navy folks have to do something with engineering because of the complexity of the ship. And this is where he got his love and desire for the sea to be on ships. And they did escort duty and things of that nature. And later on, he was recalled to active duty as a recruiter in DC. As a recruiter in DC, this was a 1-year call-up. He was, this is during the time where Truman was segregating. The military was told to desegregate, and so the Navy called him up, 1-year tour. after he was back home working in the post office, working on the railroad. Back then, trains were used to carry the mail, and so he got the orders, and he said, "Hey, this is this is what I enjoy," and he took this assignment. Of course, he was a little wary of it because he didn't think that this quite fit him. But he ended up getting there in DC. He ended up recruiting and joined the job, and he ended up extending for 29 more years, and he volunteered sea duty with the battleship Iowa. And this is where he kind of starts getting into communication. And he also transferred to the Navy. And this is the USS Iowa, what it looked like back then with the 16-inch guns. And, the Navy has several classes of ships. And, they deployed to the Far East and they did raids off the coast and search and rescue and different types of support. This next one, a year later, this was one of his favorite ships, a destroyer. After the Korean War, he transitioned, like I said, to the Navy. He became the first African-American officer to command a ship when he became acting commander of the USS Theodore E. Chandler. And during this time, Admiral Gravely helped with the integration efforts, in the Navy. And he also went to the Navy War College later on. But just to give you an idea of just the different classes of ships they had to work on. And he really loved the destroyer. The destroyer was his favorite ship because a destroyer can do multiple things, whereas a carrier it can do multiple functions, but the destroyer can go after submarines, they can do anti-aircraft. This one was to protect aircraft. And he was also selected for captain on this one. And then this is the Fog Out, which he later went on to serve. This is a destroyer escort as well. And he was promoted to rear admiral later on after this. But see, this is a lot of just think of being in charge of just getting this ship to move at 25 knot speed, taking care of the maintenance. Could you imagine the communication system on this ship and having, he talks about having to send messages, and if messages didn't get sent, they would get in big trouble. And back then they had to learn Morse code, Simophone, different signals, cryptography. And so that's a lot harder than what we do now, picking up a phone and just making a phone call, or and so it was really difficult assignments that they had to do. And he talks about that. Luckily that he went to school, having to train radio men and making a name for himself, because he would actually remember to do the messages right. You had when he was in school, you had a certain amount of time where you had to decipher 15 sentences, like a minute or something like that. And so it was very difficult. And it's also very difficult coming up into communications to get a normal command, because the Navy, every service has their cream of the crop guys, right? Like special forces, every service branch has a special forces, right? These are the cream of crop guys. Well, the Navy, you have to be a surface warfare officer. And then you have the aviators, and the Army is the infantry. We're the queen of battle. And then you have the king of battle, which is artillery. So you have to have certain positions to get command. And so he started to become concerned that communications wasn't going to get him enough training that he needed. But he was very curious. He learned everything he could about these ships and how to maneuver it and drive it. And he talks about being a you know, the sailors look up to their captain. If the captain can't maneuver the ship, then that's a, you know, they kind of look down upon the captain, and it's really difficult to move up to the pier, move up to the port, and different things of that nature. They have radars and stuff on them. This is another ship that he was command of, the Tulsa. This was during World War II, and it was also to protect anti-aircraft. I don't know, Richard, you're too old for World War II, but Vietnam, we'll get to that ship, and maybe you've seen some of these out there. This is the Duet. And the Duet was one of his favorite ones because it was a, you know, in the better you are, right? And so it was important to you know, to have command of these ships and learn everything you could about them so that you can move up the ranks. Okay, so he did that in Vietnam. He talks about, let me back up here. I want to get ahead of myself real quick. So he talks about in Vietnam, he had some close calls. One of them was, and he talked about the difficulty of working off the coast and supporting the carrier groups. He's, you know, talked about one time a plane actually crashing in the water and having to, you can see that helicopter back there. And he said he was told to go rescue the sailors that had fell in the water. It was dark, and he got there right as the helicopter got there, and he ended up, they saw a helmet. The helicopter focused on the helmet. They saw a helmet, and he ended up hitting the helmet and almost hitting the helicopter because they both were so focused on the rescue at that time. So, you know, it can be very dangerous. He also mentioned that there are a lot of sharks out there. So, you know, you don't want to be sitting out there in that water too long if you do if they have a man overboard or an accident or something out in that water. So it is kind of out there being isolated, and it just talks about the you know, the challenges of war and during the Vietnam War. So here, you know, as he went up the ranks, he continued to, you know, he made rear admiral, served in the Naval Communications Command, the 11th Naval District, a cruiser destroyer group, and then his final rectorship was with Defense Communications Agency. And that just happens to be where I work at now. It's now called Defense Information Systems Agency. I do government contracting over there, and I've been over there for about 5 years. I retired out the military from there, and then 3 as I'm in the military, 2 as a civilian. And it gives me great pride to walk in the building every day and see all the former Defense Communication Agency directors, their pictures are on the wall. And so it gives me pride to see Vice Admiral Gravely's picture on the wall. And he was one of the first African-American directors there. And it was a brand new agency. It was joint. He talks about this was his, you know, one of his experiences working with the Army, the Air Force, and other services. And this is you know, and this is where he was a vice admiral. He supervised over 60,000 people in Third Fleet and 100 naval ships in 1978. So you can just see how he kind of went up the ranks there. And then he oversaw the entire communications network linking America's bases overseas. And so that's awesome, you know, that he did that. And so over his 38 career in the Navy, he retired in 1980, becoming the first African-American commander, captain, fleet commander, and flag officer. During his service, he earned numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, and the Navy Combination Medal. And so those medals, and you know, in the Navy, it's really hard to get a medal. You can get a medal for serving in combat, but it's really hard to get medals for service and the work that you're doing. You have to really work hard to get these medals, and each branch of the military has different standards for getting medals. This is one of the things I learned in my joint time, working with other naval officers. It's hard to get in awards, and these are high awards. And so 7 leadership lessons we can learn from Vice Admiral Gravely. I highly recommend you get the book. It's really unique. When I started reading Trailblazer, it's very authentic, the way Paul Stillwell, who lives in Maryland, Arnold, Maryland, how he goes to he really had to work hard to get Admiral Gravely to go through interviews to write this book. The book wasn't published in 2010. He actually was doing the interviews before Vice Admiral Gravely died, and he talks about that in the book, how humble of a man he was, and he did not want to do it. He was like, "Hey, I'm just a sailor. I just did my job. I don't want to be treated special." At one time he was interviewed in Ebony magazine, and they had to force him to do that. But again, these were times where the Navy was trying to get more, integrate the military, integrate the Navy, and so they pushed it on him. But Paul talks about how he had to really be persistent, and finally Vice Admiral Gravely allowed him to do the interviews, and that's how he was able to write the book. And so he talks about these leadership, and it's not really cut like this, but this is kind of way I pulled out it. And because I'm sharing screen, I can't see the first one. Let me see here. Let me go back. But one of the ways he learned, and even in my time in the military, I was taught volunteer for additional duty. And a lot of times we don't want to volunteer because a lot of times those volunteer opportunities, they come after your day job, after you've done your job all day, and they say, "Hey, we need volunteers." So now you have to spend additional time outside of your work. But he did that, and it allowed him to learn more about being a sailor and handling ships and maneuvering. They did a lot of exercises. And he talks about, maneuvering. I didn't realize the Navy did a lot of exercise. I thought it was just the Army, but they do a lot of exercises and training when they're out there going from coast to coast. So he did that. I think that's good leadership. And he never stopped learning, even though he went to midshipman school, he went to Columbia, he went to Virginia Union, but he still went back. He never stopped learning. He was determined. And then qualified. This is one too that I like. A lot of times we wait until we know where we want to go, and so we try to wait until we get there to start working on it. Well, he said qualified now. Start learning what you want to do now, so when that opportunity comes available, you're already ready to go. And he talks about in his book how one time when he was getting ready to take command of the faucet, and the ship had pulled into port. It was going to be going through maintenance for about 2 weeks, and he went home, and then he said, "Hold on, I just took command of the ship. I need to get back over there and try to learn about the ship." And he talks about opportunities that he did this, and so make sure you're ready. Qualify now. Work on it now. Don't wait. And despite culture and institutional obstacles, he came in, his first experience in the military was segregated, right? Everything was segregated. But then when he left, he said, "I left because, when they discharged me, no one asked me to stick around." And so he went back. He said, "You know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to talk to Alma because Alma was going right down the street in Petersburg. She was going to Virginia State, and he had met her through his sister. And he said, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to talk to this woman that I really like, and I'm going to get a job. And so he, so he did that, right? But when he got called back on active duty, he came back. He talks about it. He came back into a new Navy. It was a new Navy that was integrating through the V-12 program, through other programs, through officership programs, through, they were trying to, through Monterey, where he went to communication school. So it was different, but he was determined to succeed no matter what. It changed a lot, but he still had some obstacles. He talks about getting houses. He couldn't stand the officer quarters. He talked about when he was going from Norfolk to San Diego, to where these ships were. Some of these ships were in Miami, San Diego. They went overseas, he had to be flown out there. He had to drive all the way to California. And he talks about driving into a hotel in Tennessee and how it was really cold and how, he had the kids with him, Tracy, David, and so they bundled up in the hotel room because the heat didn't work. So he was, despite culture and institutional obstacles, he was determined to succeed. And he always looked for training opportunities. And he loved the Navy. If I can go back and read this book and tell his story, he had a love for the Navy. He had a love for his family. He had it would just be a book of love. But he looked for training opportunities and he found them. He did not settle for just being a communications officer. He wanted to be a commander. He wanted to be a captain in the destroyer. He wanted to be on that ship and learn everything. So he had a passion for the destroyer. And now that I've learned about it, hey, if I could go back, I was thinking, because I'm from Hampton, and we have down there by Norfolk Naval Base, we have Fort Eustis, and we have Andrew Langley Air Force Base. And my dad was retired Air Force. And I'm like, man, I would go back and be in the Navy because it's actually pretty good. It's like a big cruise ship, but it's also still dangerous and it's still challenging and it's a lot. And so you have to train. And he took advantage of all those training opportunities, and he persevered, as you can see, 38 years, and the things that he's went through. So these are all leadership lessons to learn from life. And this is his motto. Ms. Gravely talks about this too. It's at the if you go down to the elementary school, this is what you'll see. Success equals education, motivation, and perseverance. And these were things that were instilled, in him by his father. And the motivation, was instilled in him to be a Navy officer, to be to want to learn about a destroyer, because a lot of times you see folks get out the military and they never go back. And he did talk about folks that did that. He met some pretty famous people in the Navy that got out the Navy and and went on to do other things. They did not have that motivation to stay in it, and so he preserved over 38 years. And I just think his life is so interesting, and how he how he just stayed humble, and it's just a lot. I enjoy doing the research on this. It draws me closer to him. We need to you know, these are like three simple things that, you know, we want to see in our kids and see in everybody. Um, and so that's his motto. And so I think that's it. That's all I have. I'll stop sharing screen and we can take any questions.
There was one question in the chat that said, what was Admiral Gravely's field of study at VUU?
It was history.
Oh, okay.
Yep. He talks about it was history. He didn't really get into why he went into history, but most military officers we study history. Um, so I thought that was interesting. And he, you know, he talked about, you know, he did go to Hampton Institute for a little bit to learn the Navy. You know, that's one thing I learned about the Navy. It's like they'll send you anywhere to get you trained. And I'm assuming because the Navy is so technical, they sent him to Hampton Institute because number one, it was a black school, and he can go there, and they were teaching machine operator. But originally, Vice Admiral Gravely wanted to be a football coach. You know, wanted to get his degree. He wanted to be a football coach. He played. You know, he talks about being stationed in Norfolk, running into another sailor, and they had had like a football team, like a football league. And so he was really into football, and he was 6'3", so you know he's a big guy too. And so he talks about that.
Kelly, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've got something of an anecdote rather than a question, but before retirement, I was a civilian with the Navy, working down at Carderock, the Navy lab down at Carderock by American Legion Bridge. And they've got annual performance awards. They call them the Magnificent Eight. And one of those awards is a Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely Award for achievement in diversity and inclusion, which is a pretty big deal. All 8 of the awards are significant for employees at Carderock. And when they had the inaugural award for the Gravely Award, his widow was actually invited and was able to come for the ceremony, which was really, really cool. But she was up on stage, you know, shaking the hands of the award winner, along with the commanding officer and our civilian technical director, which was really pretty neat.
Wow, that is
so nice.
And his namesake destroyer, the USS Gravely, one of my career highlights was that's one of the Arleigh Burke class of destroyers. Yeah. And I actually was on the Navy design team for the lead ship of that class back in 84, 85. And they're still being built, which is kind of cool. But it's quite a warship worthy of his name, to say the least.
Wow, nice. I can imagine that. Yeah, I was wondering, I got a question for you, Jack. So you were on the design team. How did they determine the different classes? I know some of it, you know, the name and convention is different. Is it just armament or just?
It's usually a mix of armament and displacement, desired speed. And then they'll change them sometimes, like the Jewett that you showed the picture of.
Right.
It was DLG 29. Well, DLG meant it was a guided missile destroyer. That's the G. And DL meant destroyer leader. But a few years after that class was delivered and they were in service, they actually converted it to a cruiser, just by name. So it became, instead of DLG, it became CG. So it's CG 29. And the battleships, of course, they were just the big bad boys. That was another highlight for me, was I got to work after the destroyer design. I worked on the modernization program to bring the battleships back out of mothballs. Wow. So I got on the Iowa and on Wisconsin and New Jersey. And I have to imagine he must have enjoyed that immensely too. Although I'm sure he just saw a small part of it, relatively speaking. It's kind of like an aircraft carrier where they're so big, your job's critical, but you're very focused, as opposed to being on a destroyer where it's smaller and you've got more opportunity to play in different facets of the ship's operation.
Nice. Yeah, I was able to tour the USS George Bush. I was able to get on a sub. I can't think of the name of that one. And that's it. Yeah. It's really never got on the destroyer.
But to your question, that mix of cruisers and destroyers and frigates, that's annually a huge Navy and Defense Department struggle with what's the right mix and what can the Navy afford and what can DoD afford within the greater budget. So that was always an annual struggle that we could see kind of from the sidelines. Being the designers, we just wanted to see money poured into the next class of, any of those ships or submarines for that matter. So
yeah, they're expensive.
oh gosh, yes. A great overview though of the Admiral's career. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. Did he talk in the book at all about their initial response when Truman was attempting to desegregate? And how much success was there initially in having African-American recruits want to join at that time, being the first wave, so to speak, who would face integration? Did he discuss that?
Yeah, he did talk about it. And he was very successful. They were very successful. He talks about talks about let's see if I get this right. He talks about going to another building, and they were trying to recruit more black. So he went into like another office. He got approval to go in there, and it was in a black neighborhood. And there was a gentleman that went in there. He was a journalist, and he ended up writing a bad article. The Navy's trying to recruit. He wrote a negative article on Navy trying to recruit blacks, and it got back to the commander, and he said, "Gravely, what are you doing?" And so they had to. What they had to do is they had to put a white officer over there. And so to make it mix and change it up, and so he does talk about that, and he talked about how he really wanted to get out of recruiter duty and get back to going to destroyer. But they were, I would say, very successful. That did make me, when I was doing the research, I did want to go back and look at the Army efforts compared to the Air Force efforts and what they were doing around that time. But it wasn't an easy thing for them to do. But eventually, as he moved up the ranks, it got later on in his career, him and Alma, his wife, they talk about being received well. She talked about meeting with the officers' wives and the T's and how they accepted her, and he talked about how moving into he finally was able to move into the BOQs. Housing was a we all know we moved around before, and I moved around every 2 to 3 years, but it was really a challenge for him. So he does talk a lot about that in the book. How certain real estate agents wouldn't take him and stuff like that. Wouldn't help him find housing once they found out who he was and saw him and stuff like that. But it seems like the Navy did really well integrating, and I think it was because of he talked about how he mentored other African Americans that he would run into, and he he did have some bad bosses, we all do, and he talked a little bit about that. But the book is so I highly recommend. I have three books And when I started reading the book, it just really, I didn't want to put it down. It just really is just the way it's just hearing him talk. And then, there's also a Gravely YouTube channel that you can go to and and they post the interviews in there, the Naval Institute, just hearing him talk and looking at the book, you kind of, he's talking, he's not talking like, hey, I'm for a general audience. He's talking like real Navy. So a lot of times you have to read it, I have to look it up, and because he's saying, I didn't realize Navy used a lot of slang, Jack. Y'all got nicknames for everything more than we do. And so but the book is very authentic. I mean, even up until his death, Alma talks about how, they had to make a decision on pulling the plug on him. And fortunately, they didn't have to do it. He ended up passing away. He really struggled with high blood pressure, and then some of the medications they gave him had side effects. So he really struggled with that, and one of them made him kind of depressed. But they're very open and authentic. They don't hold anything back in the book. I mean, it's like being right there with him going through the career. I was like, wow, I wish I would have had this book, when I came in, even though, so it's very authentic.
Well, thank you. And thanks also for that YouTube reference. That's nice to know that you can go to that channel to access that.
And please share it. Please, if I enjoy going into the office and running to young sailors or commanders, young Navy officers, and I ask them, do you know Vice Admiral Samuel Gravely? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, you might want to look him up. And just, and just to know that, hey, here's an Army guy knowing a little bit more about the history. I feel a little closer to the Navy. I've served a lot with the Navy, but now it's like putting everything together. I have a different perspective of the Navy now than I had before. And Sandra and I, we were actually stationed in Naples, Italy. We were stationed on the Navy base. And so I can relate a lot to Vice Admiral Gravely's experiences. They may be a little different today, but we can't let, and that's kind of my theme, don't let you look at the culture that we're in today, right? And we can't be constrained by culture and institution obstacles, right? You see them in the office, the bureaucracy of Department of Defense, having been around the department for a long time. And I retired as an Army strategist. I started as an infantry officer, retired as an Army strategist. So we were taught Navy theory, Air Force theory, Marine theory, the capabilities of we can operate more as a joint plans, as a planner. But yeah, we highly recommend it. Definitely really good, really good. And a lot of people couldn't handle that. You think about it, some of the things, he spent a lot of time away from his family, and he even lost his son in Hawaii, in 1978, so he had a lot of ups and downs in his career. And there's some things that he talks about in the book that Jack probably knows that you can't do in the military now. It was just a different culture back then. Now everything is almost zero defect military, where you make one mistake and your career is over. You're done. He talks about learning, those things, and how but he never let it get it down. He does not talk negative in the book. He just said, hey, this is how I was, and this is what I did, and this is was the results. And it's really good.
That's awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? or comments?
Thank you. It's really important history, and thank you for sharing it. And I wish you luck. And are you still fundraising for the statue?
Yeah, they're doing, we're doing the endowment. I know there's some other organizations that are doing things in Richmond. I know they are doing the statue in Richmond. They have the USS Iowa, which has an annual honorary ceremony. I think that's what they call it in San Diego every year, and they give out scholarships. Definitely volunteer opportunities with the school, and I think I'm not sure where the ship is, where the USS Gravely is right now. I think it was I saw something, but I can't remember. But there is, this is what we have to do. I enjoyed this because as a veteran, we have to continue to keep our veterans' legacy alive. It's I'm sure if you have veterans in your family, because it is a lot. And a lot of times I try to comprehend, if I didn't go in the military, how would my thinking be, as a civilian? How would I, but my wife, she helped me out a lot. She helped me. Sandra is on the line, but she would help me when I would come home and have a bad day or be depressed. She would help me just keep a balance, because it is a lot. You're always on the go, and I used to drive her crazy, and I could just. I mean, you're moving 100 miles per hour all the time, night, day, it doesn't matter. And so, we got to take care of our veterans. And so this is, I'm so thankful to be able to do this, and Richard getting me back into it. I used to do this more often in the community when I was stationed in Miami. I used to go out Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and I'm trying to do more of it. I have another engagement on Saturday. And so, you don't stop, and that's what Vice Admiral Gravely said, no matter what, you don't stop. Just because I retired doesn't mean, I can't do other things to give back to the community and just bridge that gap for everyone to understand different cultures and different things. So thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you coming and doing this for us. It was really interesting to hear about all of his accomplishments and the things that he's done over the course of his career. So if anybody does think of questions later, feel free to email us at info@poolsvilleseniors.org, and we'll make sure to pass it along to him for some answers if he has them.
And I know y'all do a lot of events. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, we do a lot of events. As a matter of fact, we do have some upcoming. On Monday, we have John Walsh at 10 a.m. doing Edwards Ferry pop-up walk. And then on the 17th, we have our popular series with Kenny Scholes, who talks about the historic ag reserve properties. And then on Friday the 18th, we are having a movie night. We're going to be showing Top Gun Maverick. So that's going to be a lot of fun. There'll be snacks and discussion and that sort of thing. So definitely, again, thank you so much for putting on this presentation for us. And I hope everyone had a good time and that they have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Great job.
Blair.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice presentation.
Yeah, it was really great.
Very, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.